That's working. Y'all can hear me? All right. I'm going to jump right in. We've got a lot to show you today, and I'm pretty excited about this. As you know, the overall task over the course of this week was to focus in on developing a brand for downtown, as well as a brand for the west side. And I would love to tell you that we came in with a whole bunch of stuff prepared already, but that's not really how we operate. And I'm just not that together. So everything that you're going to see literally was created since yesterday. It's kind of a cool realization that this process and the foundation that we're trying to create is one that your community can take and run with. So part of the reason that our process works the way that it does is so that we can actually stress and strain the system to make sure that it works. Because you're not always going to have a professional design firm helping you to expand and roll out this system. So we need to make sure that it's something that works for you all today. So I'm pretty excited about what I'm going to show you. I'm going to share some different elements with you. I think one of the first things I always like to start with is the idea of what we heard. As you can imagine, there was a strong desire for a place to gather. I can't tell you how many times people talk to us about dining with friends. We don't like that we feel like we have to leave the community to dine with friends. They talked about other walkable communities. They talked about other places that had achieved destination status. So there very, very definitely and obviously was a yearning for a place. So all of our plans that are focusing in on revising this downtown plan reinforce what the community is saying that they want. Now, in addition to that, we heard some very interesting things about the relationship between the western side of the city and the eastern side of the city. The divide is a real divide. It is a physical divide. It's not a divide because people don't like each other, and that's a good thing to know. And I say that because honestly, those divides do absolutely exist in some communities where there is a hard and fast line, and that line might break socioeconomic, it might break racial barriers, it might break different things, but here that break between east and west is truly driven by I-4, and everybody knows why that is a physical barrier and a transportation barrier. Things are going on now to lessen the impact of that barrier. There are investments that are being made to physically lessen that. But I think that one of the things that we heard loud and clear is there is a hunger for the west side to be able to play a role. And they are playing that role, but it's almost like they want that role to be acknowledged. Over and over again, the idea of simple amenities that a place with so many residents deserves to have. The impact of having a park on the west side for a relatively large number of your population that lives over there. The numbers that we heard would make it roughly 30% of your population actually lives on the west side because of the overwhelming kind of presence of Maitland Center. A lot of people think the only thing that happens on the west side is business and office, but it really is a pretty robust mix. So what you're going to see today is you're going to see some recommendations that focus in on a couple core tenets: freshness, vibrancy, cleanliness, and expandability. We want a system that you can take and run with. We want a visual system that makes it very, very easy to connect the different parts of your community, but also connect the different activities and connect the different organizations. I want to be very mindful to remind you all that with this focus on a downtown brand, our intent is not to replace the city logo and not to alter the city tagline of a community for life. But what we're doing is we're adding a new tool to the toolbox to help re-engage and invite people to rediscover Maitland for themselves. And hopefully, as we see that residential growth that we know is on the slate for this community, we can have the tools necessary to automatically rope them in to our retail environment so we can truly realize the economic impact of those new residents. Because if they move here and shop elsewhere, our community is not realizing their true economic impact. So we want to make sure that we focus in on engagement. From a branding standpoint, we try to break this down into a foundational system that makes sense. One of the things that we always like to do is we like to start with colors. My first disclaimer is anytime you see colors on a projector, they are far brighter and more garish than you would imagine they would be. So that's why I've got this kind of turned around so you can take a look at it. With these brand elements, I want to start off by showing the color palette. We selected 6 colors, vibrant colors, energetic colors, colors that actually were derived from some of the images we took through the community. If you look at this screen, you can see it's not anywhere near as bright as it is up there. But you know, the things that you would imagine. We've got blues, we've got oranges, we've got yellows and greens, and then from the color palette, you know, with the tree cover and the things that we heard and saw, you know, there are 3 different variations of green because we kept hearing people come back to that relationship between people and place and the presence of the trees. And so we wanted the color palette to be able to reflect that. Now, the next thing that's very important for us to do is think about typeface and being able to use consistent typeface as a tool to connect the dots. We selected 2 typefaces for you all, a primary and a secondary. The primary is a contemporary sans serif typeface, but it does move away a little from what the city has been using. The city's current typeface for the city logo has very, very sharp edges to it. If you notice the M and the A, very, very pointed. We want something that was a little bit more curved off, a little bit more contemporary. And in fact, one of the things about this, if I can be a design nerd for a second, we call it sans serif. And what sans serif means is that it doesn't have doohickeys on it. That's the technical term. Those little things that come, you know, the little wings that come off the letters. Sans serif typefaces are designed oftentimes to be content neutral. A lot of times when people try to make type selections, they're trying to make selections that already have personality loaded into them. What we wanted to do is we wanted to create and use something that was content neutral so it could be very expandable and it could come to represent a personality that is still emerging and changing as this community changes. Now with that, we selected a secondary accent typeface, and that accent typeface is a more of a natural hand script typeface with variable width. It gives us that human touch so that the sans serif doesn't come off as too sterile and too cold. So we've got the colors, we've got the typeface. The next thing that we like to focus in on is the idea of message. And with that message, we draft what we call a brand statement or a brand narrative. And this is a multi-paragraph narrative that helps us to hone in on the things that we felt like we heard people say they're most excited about for downtown. So I'm going to read that for you now. We are Maitland, Florida. Established during the Seminole War, Maitland became one of the earliest settlements in Central Florida. We're one of the oldest towns in the Orlando metro, yet we have preserved our small town feel as others around us grew. Our once abundant orange groves created a rural retreat, and our leisurely growth was fueled by those seeking refuge from the north and its harsh winters, drawn here to the banks of our pristine lakes. The values of these early Maitlanders still hold true today, built on a respect for our natural surroundings, a dedication to building great neighborhoods, and a desire for a strong family life. We are intensely proud of our community and have preserved a quality of life that is second to none. It can be felt in the shade of the tree canopies along our streets, heard in the laughter of our children on their school playgrounds, and smelled in the flowers bloom in our parks. We are downtown where residents come together to dine in one of our 24 restaurants, buy fresh produce at the farmer's market, or exercise in Lake Lily Park. Our downtown is defined by unrivaled cultural opportunities, from the Maitland Arts Center and its unique history to the Florida Film Festival held annually at the Enzion, and continuing with the music of the performing arts of Maitland. Today, we are crafting a vision of a new downtown Maitland, with independent shops and restaurants surrounding a festival street that will become the centerpiece of an entire community. It will be a place treasured by residents, enjoyed by pedestrians and cyclists, and visited by citizens of our neighboring towns. The vision is big, but not as large as our resolve to make downtown Maitland the place to be. Downtown Maitland, where great friends come together, where amazing meals come together, where rich arts come together, where good times come together. We invite you to discover the heart of our warm community, downtown Maitland, where our community comes together.
Amen.
So when you bring all that together, it lands us on this very simple yet still energetic and vibrant icon. We knew early on that we wanted to lean towards what we call a monogram approach. I think that the city logo is a really good example and study of, as you try to walk down a road to incorporate literal imagery, there simply is too much to encompass to be able to fairly represent this large and dynamic community. And knowing that that logo is going to continue to exist provides us the freedom to go clean and crisp. To some, they might look at it and they might feel a connection with an orange heritage in those groves. Some might see it and feel vibrant activity. Some might feel like they're seeing a connection with that Mayan design that we see in the Arts Center that has been integrated in to many of our sidewalks and hardscapes. But it simply gives us a platform to start from. Now, with this, you can see the downtown modifier, the tagline appears in that accent typeface. We immediately jump in to make sure that we can create different variations so that you always have the right tool for the right spot. We created horizontal and stacked versions, iconic versions, what we call small usage versions, which would be the one with the M being replaced. And then also making sure that it works in one color, making sure that it works reversed out so that it can be used no matter the budget of the communication. You can't always have something run in full color. So having those simplified usage and seeing that it continues to hold up. Now, we also know that there are organizations in the community that are forming and growing and fostering communication as it relates to downtown. One of those is Maitland Downtown Partnership. So obviously we see that destination-oriented tagline simply urging people to come together, also acknowledging that our plans are coming together and it's not done yet. Here, we see a modification of that, positioning this partnership as helping to realize that vision. Now, we also knew that we wanted to give an identity to the West Side. And we wanted the identity to be both strongly connected and unique to them. So what did we do? Well, luckily, M and W look a lot alike. So all you have to do is you can simply show that they are part of the whole while also giving a unique and individual variation. So being able to kind of see, and you can see in the simplified versions where we actually use color to kind of highlight that west side of the circle. Now, in addition to that, same thing. There are smaller groups that are coming together. We understand that there's the Maitland Center Property Owners Association, but there's an interesting dynamic that could occur on the west side in West Maitland between these business owners, these residents, these property managers. So there truly becomes a partnership helping to be the public or private sector voice of the implementation of the West Side Development Plan. So having that ability to bring people together on West Maitland is extremely important. Now, talked a lot about this. I want to reinforce it one more time. When we talk about the world of branding, there's a huge difference between organizational identity and destination identity. What we're giving you with this downtown brand is a destination identity. Your pre-existing city logo is an organizational identity. Now, there are many organizations and partner groups that might or might not want to consider changing the way that they look and changing the way that their voice comes off so that the community collectively realizes the benefit of working together. So I'm going to give you some examples today. One of the first things is something that doesn't really exist now. But if you look at the businesses along Circle Drive, there's a very, very interesting gathering or clustering of artistic and construction-based businesses. That happened organically. But one of the best things you can do is when organic clusters occur, empower those clusters with an identity. So you see here a logo for Circle Drive Design District. Very, very simple variation, but it empowers those folks to be proud of being connected to one another instead of simply being a self-contained business. The CRA. CRA is a very interesting entity. It's one of those things where I don't really see this logo ever appearing very big on anything, but it's necessary sometimes to stick that thing down in the corner and say, hey, we need to know who's responsible for this, who's associated with this. Chamber. Chamber is an organization that we got a great opportunity to meet with some of its members on Tuesday morning. Is that right? Tuesday morning? And they gave us permission to kind of look. We also met with their board, gave us permission to kind of look at their identity as well. This simply shows how an adoption of typeface could give them an opportunity to connect while also maintaining a graphic identity that is all theirs. So this is a connection through typeface and color. I want to be very mindful to say, though, I'm showing this simply as an example of how they can connect, not as a commentary on the current identity. In fact, I told Jeff earlier, that logo looks like the kind of logo that I would have designed. So there's nothing inherently wrong about it at all. But as that organization continues to make inroads and continues to kind of refocus on its relationship with its members, this might be a way that it can reinforce its connection to the community. Maitland Center. There is no logo for Maitland Center. Everyone seems to know what Maitland Center is and where it is, and there is no graphic identity for it. They got this Property Owners Association, which also doesn't have a logo, but they didn't even, when they asked us if we would design a logo for them, they didn't even think about the idea of doing a Maitland Center logo. But this idea, global reach, streetline treats, like there's this interesting dynamic of there is big, important business going on in a very, very comfortable setting. And that comfortable setting is the competitive advantage that Maitland Center offers. So again, giving opportunities for individual amenities like this to be able to have their own unique brand, but possibly look at things like typeface as a connecting tool. Along with that, we're recommending a slight change in mindset so that they start to think about, instead of just being the Maitland Center Property Owners Association, we're actually calling it the Maitland Center Alliance. We think that there needs to be a better opportunity, and it's something that we heard last night. It can't just be the voice of the property managers all the time. It's very, very important that there's a mechanism and a conversation with the employees that are going on there. So as that group is bringing itself together and starting to market the center collectively, having a focus on a more well-rounded conversation is something we'd love to introduce to them. Maitland Public Library. Again, this is one of those identities. It's a core tenant in downtown. They had a pre-existing logo. Here we can show how we're not really changing the core fundamental value of their design. We're just simply updating the logo and bringing it into a larger system. So that might be an interesting way that the library could tap in and realize some benefit from connecting to the identity for downtown. So those are all kind of organizations and destinations, but we also have events. And it is so important for us to think about event integration, because the events are those positive experience generators for people. And believe it or not, we have to help those folks connect those dots. Because if we don't, someone will go to an event, have an amazing time, and turn right back around the next day and say nothing ever happens downtown. So we've got to make sure that as people are experiencing the events, that the community is starting to get some of the credit for that as well. So I've got a couple of examples. I start off with pre-existing events, and I think the first one, Art Under the Stars, Rotary Arts. It's a really, really great event. What I did here was I simply took the logo as it exists today and showed what it would look like if they adopted our typefaces. So for all intents and purposes, it still has the same feel, but it also is a very conscious visual nod saying, we want to be part of the system. Then we look at some fun stuff. I think this is where the simplicity of the icon really starts to sing for us. The opportunity to do different things and have that imagery come to represent many, many different cultures, many, many different events. Being able to use activities to activate your community. We heard a lot of talk over the course of the week, and I will say, I'm pretty sure that a lot of your citizens are convinced that the answer to all vibrancy questions lies in a splash pad. So if you actually figure out a way to disperse splash pads all throughout the community, we won't have any more problems. But the thing that I really wanted to talk about with this idea of movie night is we have to remember what we're doing here. And we need our events to perform strategic functions. We need regular, reoccurring, easy to pull off events that help to teach people how to come downtown. Local residents many times have dismissed any viability in downtown in their consideration set. So we want to strategically use those events to reintroduce downtown, and something like a movie night really is a great way to do that. Having activities around St. Patty's Day, again, you can see the ease of being able to take that primary identity system and have it grow and expand. But then everything doesn't have to be so strictly tied in and forcing that icon being reused over and over again. So having maybe a Halloween event downtown. And I will say, if you are a downtown business owner, typically Halloween events are horrible. They're no fun because the kids just run in and break stuff on their way to get their bit of honeys, and then they head out, and the parents don't even walk into the stores. So the thing that we have to realize too, though, is there's certain events that exist simply because there needs to be a relationship between a community and its businesses. And many times, trick-or-treat events or things like that are opportunities for those business owners to give back. But you can also know that maybe this is a good opportunity to get creative and to think up, what's our way of doing this? How do we want to celebrate Halloween in our downtown? Now, I'm particularly excited about the opportunity to celebrate July 4th on Independence. Your entire downtown, as the plan is emerging, is focusing on independence. You have to be very, very careful about getting too silly or too hokey. But, I mean, you are the community that chose to place your city hall at 1776 Independence Lane. So that's on you, not me. No, making sure that you take that unique identity, because if you begin to walk down the road to the implementation on this downtown master plan, your main street is Independence. So being able to take that and roll that in periodically. So this is an example of how you might tie that in. One of the things that we talked about was the idea of doing a downtown line stroll. So again, showing how the overall approach to graphics is almost infinitely expandable, giving you the idea to maintain a certain sophistication, a certain crispness and cleanliness, but also being able to really tie in to a whole host of different events. Now, one of the biggest and most important things for a community to be able to do is to be able to have very, very easy to pull off events. We're from Greenville, South Carolina. Greenville is known throughout the Southeast as being a key kind of success story for downtown revitalization. And one of the things that we did was strategic event programming. And that strategic event programming started out with a Thursday night event. And that Thursday night event was called Downtown Alive. And in its first year, the local, both the city government and the downtown hotel paid their employees to go to the event and drink a beer. Because they realized that the event would never grow if other people didn't see people congregating. So now that one event that literally only occurred from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. on Thursday nights from April to October, 2-hour event. It was a 2-hour event because the intent was to prime the pump and then release a hungry audience onto the business community that is still open. So releasing people out into those restaurants. That event has now grown to an average attendance of over 4,000 per week. It has expanded to a Wednesday night movie night at a different venue, a Friday night family-oriented jazz event at a different venue. So strategically, they're using different events, different nights, different venues with different audiences to truly introduce people to all the sides of downtown. So being able to not overthink it. I think a lot of times we get in what I call festival mentality. Everything's got to be big. It's got to be the shut down the streets and bring in all the vendors. No, just easy. Get them there regularly. We heard a lot about restaurants. You've got 24, 25 restaurants in the downtown district today. We want to introduce the idea of a restaurant month and this idea of Taste Downtown. So simply being able to invite people out to experience and explore the food that you have to offer. Season of Light. Again, it's like, I was sitting there, I was like, I can turn this into a wreath. Like, that's what was so fun about it. It really was. It was very, very easy. But the thing is, every single time your citizens see one of those variations, your overall brand earns more meaning, and it becomes more relevant to folks. Farmers market, I know, you couldn't pass that one off. Ideas like the exotic car show, and then doing a New Year's Eve event downtown and turning it into fireworks. So, in addition to all that, we also think it's important to set examples of how it might make its way into both print materials and merchandise. One of the biggest, most important things that a community needs is the opportunity for its citizens to connect and show pride in where they live. Now, you have a kind of funny dynamic when you lack a destination brand, because a lot of the city staff has these great button-up shirts with the city logo on it. But do you want other people to have that? Do you want other people to potentially send the signal that they work for the city? So now that you have this destination brand in play, you have an identity that allows people to connect with their home without confusing them with the services of the city government. So a couple things that we've got. I always like baseball caps, so I always try to create something that a baseball cap that I would wear. Fun shirts and things like that, something that's got energy and activity. Cities are notorious for creating shirts that are grass cutting shirts. You know what that is. You get it, they'll give them away free. They have 6,000 logos on the back, and you take it home and you're like, oh yeah, I know you either wear it when you're cutting grass or washing the car. And that's what the job is. You want to create a product that people are proud to wear, because if they wear it out, they become walking billboards. Also going in and starting to connect your brand to premium products and premium brands that other folks know. I've got a almost 13-year-old daughter who for some reason thinks that swell bottles are the greatest thing that ever happened. And she was like, I want a swell bottle, swell bottle. I had no clue what it was. Next thing I find out, they say $40 water bottle. I'm like, what in the world? But that's the kind of thing where when a certain brand carries with it value and equity, when you attach your brand to it, there is brand transference. So if you start to connect your brand with other premium brands, you actually earn additional credibility from them. This is the kind of thing that the private sector could easily take and run with. You have businesses all throughout the community that know their customers and might be able to find ways that their own business can profit from being able to help the citizens connect with the brand. And many times people ask me the question, well, isn't that scary? How do we control it? What about trademark? There isn't anywhere else called Maitland. Another city would have to change their name to Maitland to actually harm you. And for some reason, people are scared to death of what happens when they make a strip club with that logo. That's never happened to me. Like the closest I have gotten is an OBGYN office that made a variation of it. And that's nothing, that's nowhere near the same. So being able to make the resources available is one of the best keys to brand implementation. And it allows the private sector and public sector to roll the brand out in concert instead of having all the pressure on the public sector to do that brand launch. Well, like we said, we heard a lot about restaurants and things like that. Being able to go out and have a restaurant, a dining guide, so that you can highlight some of those things that you have to eat here in the community. Street banners, you've already shown some banners that you're starting to put out throughout the community. You can use banners to help people understand where they are. You can use banners to help people understand when they've entered a certain place. You can use banners to help lessen the impact of physical divides, because the visual continuity of banners help people to feel like they're connected to two sides. So be very, very strategic about those banners as you continue to use those throughout the community. Signage as well. I think signage is something that's hugely important for the community. There's some signage that has already been implemented. You all have some of the most attractive wayfinding signage that I've ever seen in my life. It's sculptural. It might as well be public art. The other side of that is, might not necessarily be the most effective signage for vehicular scaled, but it's very effective for pedestrian scaled. So being able to have the right tools to do the right job in the right place. We've got a couple things we're showing here. We're showing downtown gateways. You can have several different gateways in several different sizes. Believe it or not, you don't have to put a gateway up only at your corporate limits. Announcing arrival when the physical place starts to change is completely and totally fair game. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll go put a gateway sign out at our corporate limits, and then there's no real communication after that. So whether it is a monument style or whether it's a pole mounted, here we're seeing kind of a pole mounted variation. Of course, we're seeing those street banners and then two different scales of trailblazer signs. You do have some very wide streets, so sometimes your scale is going to have to be relatively large. Believe it or not, on these trailblazer signs, they have to adhere to one of the most stunning documents the U.S. government has ever created, the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices. If you've ever read it, it is a fantastic read. If you download it to your iPad weighs 7 pounds more because it's such an intense document. It actually states that the minimum height of a letter on a trailblazer sign is 4 inches. And most traffic situations call for 6 inches. So you can imagine if just the letters are 6 inches, these end up being pretty large signs. And you can see how the signage that you have in place is very much pedestrian scale, but you have to have that vehicular scale as well. And then finally, to wrap it up, I just want to give you some examples of how we can take it all, wrap it up together, and put it in kind of a marketing package of sample advertising. So what I've done here is all these photos are photos that I took this week, and it simply shows how we can take that simple come together tagline and have it continue to grow and expand. Where lunch hour and leisurely strolls come together. Where delicious and nostalgia, I should have said nostalgic, but that was pretty amazing shake I had there. Where story time and well-read come together. Where history and vision come together. Where peace and tranquility come together. Where deep roots and branching out come together. Where free time and green space come together. Where beauty and nature come together. Where cut loose and take a break come together. Where front porch and history lessons come together. Which is pretty cool. These little birds are crazy. So this was at lunch yesterday, where wildlife and lunchtime come together. Unfortunately, I missed the moment about 3 minutes before where the bird was standing right next to that guy on the table. Where color and life come together. Where lakefront and escape come together. So you can start to see, I mean, those were just some of the quick images that we captured around the community. We feel like what we have here is we've got a foundation that makes it very, very easy for partnerships to occur, very easy for people to connect the dots. I think one of the big things that we're focused in on is having an identity system that helps you to cut through the clutter, that helps people to really feel like they're seeing something repeated over and over again. And unfortunately, in today's world, there's so much competition for people's attention that you have to have a very strong sense of continuity to actually make that connection and make that impact. So that's what we were able to put together for you since yesterday. I would love to open it up at this point for your thoughts and your questions and any comments that you all have or anyone in the audience might have.
Good. I'm certainly comfortable with opening it up to the crew, everybody in the room. And if there's some input that you'd like to provide, I'm sure that I've had a chance to sit down. Joy, as you'll have the opportunity to chime in.
I guess.
Absolutely, and I think one of the lines that we had to continue to kind of walk through was that realization that we didn't want it to try to replace this kind of citywide. This was not necessarily intended to be that citywide brand. I think that the integration of the schools, the family friendliness, all of those things are easy to pull off, and they are one of the top value sets. But being able to make sure that what are some ways that we can bring that focus on the schools into that downtown core itself. I think I almost want to use it as a challenge to make sure that the value that we have on education truly gets integrated into the downtown that we realize as well. So it's not just outside, but it continues to be integrated in. Yeah, I love the thing. Thank you so much. Great, great. Right, right. Yeah. Well, and I will say, you all have done a truly masterful job at finding ways that you can pay subtle tribute to combine influence without having it become dictatorial. One of the things that I noticed, and I'm not sure that anybody else would really be struck by it, but to me, I saw it, I was just like, that right there is brilliant because of its simplicity. In your wayfinding signage, how you have solid colors to denote your signs, but then you have that very, very subtle stair step at the bottom. So the base starts with white, and then you get that stair step architectural element that pays tribute back. There were a lot of things that I played into and kind of looked at with the influence of the overall circle and the design elements. There's an element that's known as the Mayan tree of the world. And it's always contained within a circular element. Sometimes it's also contained within a stair step, kind of mirror image stair step inside that. It kind of weaves in and out. It is not what the imagery is, but it was very much influenced by that. But I think the thing that I was very hesitant to do was I wanted to pay tribute without getting too literal. Because one of the aspects and attributes, once you really land purely in that Mayan art, is intricacy. Part of the thing that people are drawn to in it is the intricacy of the relief and the detail that's in there. And so I think that there's some more ways that we can integrate some of the elements in, especially with the brand extension. But I feel like the versatility of the icon itself allows people to see the connection if they want it, and also allows people to see the departure if they want it. And I think that was a fine line that we were walking. Was there were some people that were pretty vocal about it. Oh, it needs to be Mayan, 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 and other people saying, I don't know what that is, and we need to do something different. And we tried to walk that road. Do you feel like, just like I said before the presentation, do you feel like you could take that downtown logo, put it alongside your logo, and have them feel like they complement one another?
Absolutely, and I think the typography and the colors really help me. I have a question about the cultural corridor, because you did some amazing brand extensions. That's something that's been a discussion with the master planning too, of, downtown, cultural corridor is in downtown, cultural corridor name, what happens? I kind of thought it might pop up at a brand extension. Since it didn't, I'm guessing there was a reason.
Okay, so I'm on the fence. From a branding perspective, right now it's identified as a cultural corridor. After analyzing the physical recommendations that are being made in terms of trying to create a destination district, the question that I asked is, as we achieve this, as we build this destination, this core district that we want, is the idea of a cultural corridor divisive, or is it reinforcing? Because the assets that we have today are world-class assets that are typically components of a downtown. So I think the question that it would be easy for me to create an extension that incorporates the cultural corridor. I did not want to create that logo yet because I feel like that planning process still needs to flush out. Are those cultural assets a part of the whole? Or is there actually a need to continue to separate them out a separate stream. Does that make sense? It's, I felt like if I designed it and either went with cultural corridor or cultural belt, I would be using the branding to cement a concept before it was ready to be cemented. I can be honest with you, I like the idea of all of those things simply being the assets of a destination downtown. And I'm not sure that the lifespan of that identity is something that needs to exist 10 years down the road. It might be a temporary, it might be a 5-year strategy so we can continue to use cultural assets to draw people into the core of the community while we are developing the well-rounded destination. So that was a hard question. That was a good question. Ben.
I really like, I think the most impactful side and the west side actually going together in such a clever way that even though you put the two signs together, you know the difference, but yet you can see the relationship. I died when you showed those colors at first. I thought, thought was, wow, the cost of our stationery just went up a bunch because I color not 3 or 2. And everything that we advertise with is more costly because of those colors. But that means other people won't be using choices for 2 colors.
Absolutely, absolutely. You can definitely simplify it down. And the thing that is so interesting when you look at the way that production processes evolve, even in the past 5 years. First of all, as we know, so much has moved to digital, and in a digital deployment, the number of colors doesn't matter. But in addition to that, we've seen the whole nature of commercial printing starting to change. And you're starting to see that a 2-color print job oftentimes is not that much cheaper, if cheaper, than a full color process job, because those full color process jobs are the way the presses are typically loaded up. So the nice thing about this brand is it's not like you are trying to maintain the brand of Coca-Cola. You know, anytime Coke prints something, if they print a full color ad, it's not those 4 full colors, it's 4 plus their red, because they have to make sure that that red is the same every time. This is pretty easy to accomplish. I wouldn't have ever recommended so many colors if I didn't think that the way you're already rolling, it would be easy to transition that. But I love the comment about West Side. I really do think that West Maitland is, we had a great conversation with residents last night, and they just, you know, it was almost the simple acknowledgement that, hey, you are part of the whole. You're part of this story. You're not a separate place. You are part of the bigger picture.
Okay, now the other question would be on color. I used to do a newsletter, and it looked great on my computer, but everybody else's computer is different, and the colors come out differently. And play around with that at all to see if any one color might get really.
Most of the ones that we're using, again, with that, I mean, I remember back in the day, 10 years ago, when you're sitting there doing web design, and it was completely and totally at the discretion of the user how that variation. A lot of these colors fall in the spectrum where everything is I'm pretty confident with it. The only one that sometimes can be funny is if you have oranges. Sometimes an orange can tint brown in certain cases and things like that. But what we're going to do is, as we move this to final, we will make sure all the colors are going to be defined. They used to always talk about Pantone colors. What we have started using is we've started using a separate Pantone swatch book that's actually a CMYK process definition. So that means that by using that standardized process definition, you can achieve a pretty high level of consistency, but then we're also gonna save it out in 5 different file formats for every single logo. So it'll run through our color filters before we give that stuff over to you, and really the best you can hope for today, because there's certain stuff that's just outside your control.
I found it very interesting when you were talking about the empty. Was that really?
For the zip code.
For the zip code, it's 60 and 29%. They're really the minority, right?
Right.
And the young.
We've heard a lot about that since the day one we stepped in here about the makeup of the community. And, I had my preconceived notions, I think, coming in too, just looking. But I've come to find out myself as an outsider, is diversity of ages here. And I think a lot of it happening, you go into like around Lake Sibylla, Lake,
Okay.
and even Lake Maitland, you see a lot of the older stately homes. Chances are those are probably folks that are in that 59%, sort of mature years standpoint. Those older folks. Also look at places like your new development with the villages of Lake Lily. You probably have a larger portion of that may be a little bit younger. Also think about, you may have even a larger mix of age groups over past I-4, where you have a smaller neighborhoods, smaller homes, as well as nice, very, high-end condos and apartments. So I think when you look at the whole, and you understand that the data that we're sharing with you is actually, like Ben says, it's not just the city limits, it's the city limits expanded. Although your zip code almost mirrors your city limits, it still goes a little bit further and captures a few more people. But I feel very confident that those numbers that we're showing in that segmentation report are accurate to who you are. And sometimes it takes, doing that kind of market research and looking at your demographics, maybe looking at it from a different way. That segmentation does that for people to realize, okay, maybe it is a little bit I thought it was.
But I think it also speaks to the idea that you need to make sure that your housing diversity and your acquisition point is appropriate for all of those stages. I think one of the things that I can tell you very clearly based off what we heard, as many folks that talked about how much they had a value and a quality for the schools, if the young, growing families can no longer afford to live here, everyone is going to not like what that does to the quality of life in the community. So making sure that you're able to maintain that housing diversity and that availability is something that's, you just have to kind of be mindful.
And one last thing about that segmentation report, particularly the life stage in those just 3 sole categories, there is. So that younger life isn't just singles, it's most, or probably some families that do come in.
Friends and shows like people would move. Actually be a value to the family.
Nothing that we can dig into on the data to tell us. But what I can tell you is communities that create a quality of life that you want, we see that happening. And from what we've been told over the course of particularly this week, totally we're seeing that happen. And we reflected that in the brand statement as well. This is a great place to raise a family. Not everybody lives where they grew up. I don't live where I grew up. Most people don't, but you want to create a community leave life, well, maybe they want to come back here. And maybe they want to come back here to start raising their family. From what we're hearing, that's happening here already. One of the things that was and I forget exactly how we said it. Help me with this for a second. But I mentioned it in our last meeting yesterday, and I thought it was such an awesome statement. Great place to raise a family. Great place to raise a family. Well, it's the point of the comment was, well, this is a great place to be raised too. You know, boy growing up here, that's what it was.
Yeah.
And I think you've built those dynamics here to where you're seeing people come back, and certainly the people that come here, maybe those millennials, those products like you're talking about, we're creating that quality of life where, yeah, I'm getting married, I'm having a kid, I'm somewhere in Maitland where I can live rather than having to go.
And in addition, yeah, anecdotally, not here per se, but nationally, the thing that we know for sure is the families with school-age children tend to be the population most willing to adapt their preferred housing type to be able to get into the school district they want to be in, get their kids in. So, you know, when you're a younger population, you've got a lot more flexibility. There's not that same determination, so you kind of want what you want. Once you start hitting empty nest stage and retiree stage, you kind of done your thing. You pick where you want to live, and that young family, I think they're the most malleable in terms of what kind of thing. They might love the idea of a single family home with a big yard, but if it's the difference between a single family home with a big yard in a bad school district and a condo with a shared courtyard in a good school district, we're seeing trends showing they are willing to go to that single family that condo. So that is kind of working in your favor as long as you keep the school quality high.
It's, particularly a lot of folks my age,
To answer that, I think some of your thoughts there, particularly about the changing demographics that we've seen in our community in the last few decades, and that's sort of having kids really late. Difference in demographics from what it was when I was a kid. But those types of things, people are having less children later. Those are changing some of those patterns, but also the recession changed our housing patterns significantly, both from a development side as well as from a consumer side. You're seeing a lot more, particularly in an urban market, which we're in, a lot more people that you would traditionally think would have rented who are renting right now. And that doesn't necessarily just mean multifamily properties. That means renting, single family homes as well. But people are more likely to rent now. Rental properties are generally going to be more of those single family attached or multifamily type of products. And I guess the only other thing to say that about your market here is if you look at what you have right now on the ground, I mean, you've got a pretty high-end market for multifamily here. The rent, according to Zillow, which is a pretty doggone accurate indicator of what the market is about $1,700 a month. That, if you look at national trends, if you look at the Orlando Metro, means it's a higher quality product that people are renting here. And I don't know if that necessarily answers your question, but certainly I think based on trends and based on multifamily product might be a little bit different here.
Absolutely.
multifamily, the dominant housing.
I don't know that I can answer that question. I think a lot of it has to do with the urban market, too. Dynamics here that are very interesting. Kind of pretty much built out in this community. There are a very few significant pieces of developable properties that you have here. Many of those are already earmarked for the developments you're talking about. After that, where else can we go short of redevelopment? Now, again, that could occur here, but I think looking too far into the crystal ball is, number one, a challenge because we don't know what those trends will be in the future. But number two, I mean, pretty much, we're set as far as how we can develop in the future anyway. A lot of land left in Maitland.
Any other thoughts or questions? Yes, ma'am.
Could you talk a little bit about the roles and responsibilities?
Sure.
I think you did an amazing.
Thank you.
Love the colors, love the typeface.
Great.
It really looks good.
Yeah,
and that
but
comes
imagine
from-
if we were actually paying.
Yeah.
So in terms, I think the first thing is the logistics. So one of the things that's kind of cool about this process is the whole focus is on creating a brand toolkit that's then made available to brand partners throughout the community. So once we move to a point where council approves it and it kind of goes to final, that all the files will be prepared and there will be a style guide document. The style guide document will tell brand partners how to use it, how not to use it. It'll define all the colors and typefaces and give them all those digital assets. In addition to that, it'll share our digital photography with them and things like that. So it can empower people in the community to be able to take this and run with it. We have obvious partner organizations. I mean, obviously the CRA is kind of pushing this from the city side in terms of being our client, but groups like the Downtown Partnership, groups like the Chamber, we have these partnership entities that we're going to immediately share those assets with. One of the biggest mistakes that a community makes is they get really, really excited about having a brand and they decide they want to do like a big launch party and then they don't do anything after it. So we're strong believers in the idea of a rolling launch, being able to get things out there, start to get things into the community, hit it from all different angles, hit it from your organizational angle, from your community, public sector, from your private sector. And then once it started to take hold, that's when you it's almost like you step back and you launch that out.
Here's the coolest thing about, it doesn't specifically answer your question, but it's the coolest thing about these brand products, particularly where you all are right now. Rollout on brand and implementation of brand is fairly simple. And for the most part, most applications, it's relatively inexpensive. Yes, signs cost a heck of a lot of money, but placing this on a website, putting up banners down and producing those, they don't take really that much capital investment. The cool thing is, from an implementation standpoint, is you guys can use these branding tools to help you communicate progress of the downtown vision. Big vision, it's going to take a while for us to realize this. I've never been in any community where we've gone through a planning process that didn't go, did this 10 years ago and nothing happened. But what they don't realize is a lot did happen, it just wasn't that visual. These branding tools gives us the ability to do these visual marketing pieces, and whether it be, and sort of release them out into the wild and help you show, yeah, we are making progress. Doing the big hard stuff that takes a while, but we're also realizing our vision throughout the community. So.
And in addition, one of the things that we've created that I've started using a lot, I mean, we've worked with 450 communities doing processes just like this. We've created a one-page document talking about how to be a brand partner. And literally, all it is a list of ideas. Different ways that a business, an organization, or a resident could go out and actually connect with the brand. So we try to make it as easy as possible, but we also realize that there's a certain amount of that implementation that's going to be organic and natural to each community. And we don't want to over-formulate it. So we'll set a couple benchmarks. We'll set the kind of basis of, if you're not doing these things, you're letting you're missing the ball on certain things, digital implementation, some of that free stuff that Aaron mentioned. But then one of the other things that we like to do is we like to put in place a couple of key benchmark indicators on the front end, so we can also start to measure, is this starting to stoke the fire? Are people talking about Maitland more? So we'll put in a couple listening tools that will help Charles to kind of monitor as this rollout happens. Hey, are people taking it and using it? And then in addition to that, there's also just there's an overall organizational byproduct, just like you talked about last night. The hope is, by visually looking like we're all working together, it helps groups to work together. And we talked about this last night. It was an interesting idea of, when a community lacks a downtown, many times the independent organizations that exist in those communities, they end up putting up walls around themselves. They're unintentional walls, but you have to be self-serving and you have to be self-preservation oriented, because there's lacking that sense of community essence that many times a downtown, it gives somebody conceptually the idea of how they catalyze themselves and connect themselves to a place. So I'm really hopeful that tying all these things in together, we're going to start to see some additional energy, and the momentum is definitely moving in the right direction now. That's one of the good things we have.
I saw the graphic and the branding, and
Right, thank you.
work is really, really very, very impressive. Graphics very, very much, and the image very, very creative.
Cool.
I think what has been implied here, and I don't quite know how to do it graphically, but if in the graphics it could become slightly Mayan, and you say, well, what are you talking about? You know, you have a circle like that. There are many Mayan that have, when you see a Mayan image, you get there's a certain way of they putting it together.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want us to be Mayan,
Mm-hmm.
but we could make it more contemporary Mayan.
Mm-hmm.
And put it in the graphics, and I think it might just put a little edge on certain things and get that image that, hey, that is part of us, it's part of our history, and it's a contemporary part. It's not literally, going with a sundial.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think it's exceptional what you did. I
Great.
really, really like it.
Thank you so much.
Could you back it up a few, since I walked in afterwards, and I just wanted to see it.
While Jerry's
Yeah,
watching.
please, whatever Jerry wants.
See,
No more pizza for you. No. The confluence of, as Bev had mentioned, because it's very big, coming together of the east and west side, and the yin and the yang, or the, what would be, the min and the yang of Maitland and the west side,
see those?
because
Mhm.
that is,
Yep.
that is. Talk about it.
Yes, ma'am.
Two questions. One, if the question was raised, do we wait on the logo for our sign for the question was not answered. It was just thrown out. And I'd like to hear your response to that. And then the second thing I would like a response to is, what else could we out with this system, like Circle Drive? I thought that was very good to pick that up, because that's one thing that I felt could be a separate whole by itself, and you came up with that.
Well, and I will say, that was definitely, Charles helped to point that out to us, but it is those little details like that I think, those are the things that make a community interesting. And I think that, especially in the downtown core, one of the things that you can do in terms of the potential of calling out other little areas, we talked a little bit about the cultural corridor. I think as the downtown continues to grow and evolve, there are probably going to be certain things that that happen, but I think one of the big things that I always say is with districting like that, allow the district to emerge organically and then be able to provide the support tools once it's been noticed. Organically grown districts inherently end up being stronger and more sustainable than somebody saying, you know what? I think we ought to create a railroad district over there because there's one building that looks like a train might, used to go by it. So allowing those natural identity districts to kind of occur. One of the things that I do think would be important though is shoring up some of the identities of the residential around downtown and help to use the downtown brand to help those residential neighborhoods feel connected to the downtown instead of separate.
Which is one of the main guiding principles of the master plan too. The signage question, and Ben, you're welcome to chime in on this too. It's my understanding that you all are sort of in decision-making mode on where it goes. Short answer to your question is yes, you want to figure out what graphics is before you spend significant time. However, this is probably going to be ready to go before your decision on those logistics of the sign.
You've been around.
Before we go spending a bunch of money on a design that may high quality stuff, I would rather hold off. There's no rush to get that sign up on a trestle.
Yes,
It's real simple.
When I say design, like physically attaching it to the railroad trestle, the one goes on the piece of metal, we can do it now.
I guess that exactly. That's it. I guess what I would advise you is don't hold off on sign design while you're waiting to figure because this really is just kind of content on that sign. We've worked also, not only that, we've worked with signage manufacturers all over the place, and once you'll get to that point, we can give them what they need to apply that to the sign when it's ready to go. So I guess timing, I don't see it being an issue at all.
Confused on that, so
Yeah.
I understand that.
Dick?
okay.
Okay, Bill, go ahead.
I have a third question based on what
Wait,
you
but we
said.
only allocated two, so, no, go ahead.
I'm thinking of Greenwood Gardens. I don't know if you made that tour. Our housing that is between
Yes.
1792 and Maitland Avenue
Mhm.
and Maitland Boulevard. And I don't know if they're the oldest residential part of the city that's still in existence. But they have a character all their own.
Mm.
And I'm thinking that that's one place that we could possibly call out due to its location where some connection between train station them and would that be something that would be a worthwhile thing? I don't believe they have a big sign there that everybody says, where is Greenwood Gardens? Well, you have to know because there is no sign.
Do they have any kind of homeowners group? Well,
We have
okay.
a Q&P with them where actually, interestingly enough, the colors, they look like leaves and they're the green and oranges that you have there and it says Greenwood Gardens. So it's because it's tree canopy that you,
Mhm.
that like all of their Q&P is the closest thing they have to like a plan, a master plan for that area.
Right.
And then you could see using those colors, putting the M in Greenwood Gardens and
I think the thing that gets a little hairy when it comes to neighborhoods and the city going to the step of designing things for neighborhoods is you start to open up the whole of, okay, so when I have a new planned community, or if I have a development, or if I have somebody who's doing something, they're gonna brand everything on their own. If I have a neighborhood that doesn't have a homeowners association, and all of a sudden, the city truly is creating an identity for this neighborhood and giving it to them, are we prepared to do that if the other neighbor, like what are we gonna do when other neighborhoods want one too? I think my first response always is, we create this brand toolkit with the mind that if there are passionate residents who sit there and say, you know what, I want one of those for my neighborhood, can I get those tools and make that? Then my response to that would be absolutely. The city kind of honing in on one neighborhood and picking it as the example, sometimes it can be a little hairy. And it's just, I hate to allow politics in the situation to get in, but I mean, this is the city, so you have to think about those sometimes. I would almost rather simply announce a push to say, we have new branding resources available, and we urge communities and neighborhoods to think about how they might integrate it into their own neighborhood pride campaigns. I think one of the things that the mayor talked about earlier in the week was this idea of stoking pride of the citizens. So how can we do things that are going to fuel engagement and fuel, cleanliness of property and those kinds of things. So it's a little tricky road to walk down sometimes, and I think making the tools available a lot of times is just as good as doing it for them. And then see who steps up to the plate. Dick.
Oh, I have a lot of prefacing to do before I say what I want to say.
Okay.
First of all, what Hank said and all the praise he gave you, I want to double that. It was great. You've led us right up to the threshold.
Great.
I have also zero artistic capabilities. Having said that, and telling you, I really like the shape of the design very much. Two, with the colors.
Okay.
One is that the colors evoke, and this is the most important one to me. It's a little bit of a northern tree kind of thing.
Okay.
And we are definitely a southern city.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The other is, given the recent activities that occurred downtown, it's sort of the rainbow, or you see that. If this ties us into that, do we want to be or not want to be tied into that kind of thing? So those two things
Absolutely.
are kicking around in my head.
The first one, let me hit the second one first, because the second one's easier for me. I've been doing this work a lot, and as you can imagine, anytime you use more than 3 colors, there's the automatic flag that goes up in certain people's minds of, are we denoting gay pride? And if we are we okay with that or are we not? And I have come to a point in my mind where I have a very comfortable spectrum that I don't think evokes the rainbow. And one of the best things that you can do to not evoke the rainbow is never use purple. I have definitely discovered that, if for some reason that violet spectrum starts to evoke that. But being able to kind of keep this thing right between your orange, yellow, green, blue, I'm comfortable with it, but I absolutely understand. I think that's a conversation that you guys can have locally. The other thing is, I did a couple things with it. If your thoughts end up being prevalent, then obviously simply changing those 3 orange leaves makes a very big difference to the composition. You know what I mean? Like it really is those orange leaves that denote something a little different. So it's hard though. You have to walk down that road of style and all that kind of stuff. So I hear you. We'll definitely keep our eyes and ears out for that during the refinement stage. And
to say the orange ain't leaving?
I mean, it's got orange and blue in there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
colors are staying.
Well, guys, we've kept you for almost an hour and a half. Joy, did you?
No, I was saying, I choose to see it as garnet gold.
Yeah, garnet gold, absolutely, absolutely. Well, look, y'all, I don't want to keep you any longer. Thank you all so much for your participation. Thanks for your feedback and all your comments, and thank you for hosting us for a great week this week.